Awesome. A very good evening, colleagues, and welcome to our thinking space. As colleagues in industrial psychology, we are gathering from different parts of the profession and really just so encouraged by how many of us have shared their thoughts around the proposed frameworks, how others have reached out in the last few weeks, and really just reminds me of our role as SIOPSA within the IOP community. So if we can play an advocacy role, create platforms where we can think together, then we are doing our work. So my name is Sharon Munyaka, and I am the current president of SIOPSA. And with me on this call today, sharing in the conversation are colleagues in academia, EXCO members in SIOPSA, and other colleagues within industry. And as each person jumps in to share, I think it's important to also just introduce yourself and give some framing in terms of how you are entering the conversation. I think for all of us, we are seeking answers. We are also trying to make sense of these proposed frameworks and what they mean for us. We've been able to gather so far 85 responses, which is great. And a lot of the themes that are coming up from people are around what is the impact of these proposed frameworks? What do they even mean? Where do they come from? How does it affect me as a student? How does it affect me as someone who is a seasoned industrial psychologist? So really the space for today is to get a few colleagues to share their insights on what they've understood the frameworks to be, but also a space for all of us to think together. In terms of process with the Health Professions Council, there are roadshows that are currently underway. There's one that's coming up on the 13th of June. And the circular that's gone out is they want to have coordinated groups coming into the conversation. So unfortunately, it's not open for everybody. So if we can self-organize, I think it really strengthens our position as industrial psychologists to come in. Hello, Lindy. It helps us to coordinate our efforts in terms of how we enter the conversation. So I'm going to start off with my colleague. So Rowan is the president-elect for SIOPSA. You want to say hello to everybody and just give a little bit of context of your thoughts of how you are entering the conversation and how, the lens through which you're going to contribute.
Hi, Sharon. Hi, everyone. Thanks for that introduction, Sharon. I think, having had a number of conversations with some of our colleagues, I think the lens with which or the perspective with which I come into this conversation is with an open mind, and the conversation with the Health Professions Council to understand the perspective with which they drafted this framework, and to perhaps also represent the views that we hear from this group in that conversation to ensure that those views are represented. And so understanding the implications for us, if there are any implications, and making sure that the Health Professions Council consider these as they move forward. And so really just going into this with an open mind to understand, and also to shed light on the perspective from an IOP perspective as well, because this is not just a framework for IOPs, it's a framework for the training of psychologists in general. And I think we need to make sure that our perspective is represented in this conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rowan. My partner in crime, Prof. Lene Grafner. So the survey that you got was co-created with Lene, just to help us gather insights and to also just manage the conversations that were going around. People were at different stages in terms of panic. Others were feeling encouraged. Others were confused. And we thought, you know what? Let us create a space where people can talk. So over to you, Lene, to say hello to everyone and just how you are entering the conversation today.
Thanks, Sharon. Hi, everyone. Yes, so I'm entering this conversation as a former HOD, Head of Department at Northwest Department of Industrial Psychology. I recently stepped down, and when I was HOD, just as short as 2 weeks ago, this new framework came under my attention in that capacity. And obviously I was very concerned, and so we started having a conversation via the SAOPSA platform, being the HOD forum at SAOPSA. And we really just want to understand what the thinking is, where this comes from, building up towards the roadshow the 13th of June. So I was really glad to see all the questions that we have gathered. Personally, we will work through the framework with you. I can just say that I was completely confused. I did not really understand what it meant at all. But we had a nice meeting where it was clarified, and we hope to give you that clarification as far as we know up to now, and then building up towards the roadshow to get more clarification, because I think that is what's necessary. As Ruane said, personally also, I would think I'm going in with an open mind. I'm very skeptic and very wary, but I must say, I would like to know what the HPCSA is thinking. What is their proposal? Perhaps it can be better for us. So that is where I am as well. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Lene. Another colleague, Prof. Carol Stantz, has been very helpful in terms of helping us think through these frameworks. So he's an elder in the field and has really been involved in different conversations with the Health Professions Council, and he will also shed some light on the frameworks. Carol, you want to say hello to our colleagues and how you are entering the conversation?
Thank you, Sharon. I think I'm an elder because of my hair, and coming a long way. So for colleagues, I've been president at CIOPSA in 2013. And that's why they call me an elder, and there's a few aspiring elders around the table as well. From that perspective, I've been part of the CIOPSA HOD Forum task team. So the HOD Forum is where all the HODs in the country come together and discuss concerns of mutual interest, I think. And so we created the task team already way back in 2020 to engage with a new suggestion that our professions come up that is named the reintegration of internships into the master's program. So it is on the framework that they suggest, but it seems a little bit hidden for now, but we will go into that space when we have a discussion. So I'm a previous HOD at both UP, and I've also done some work at UJ as HOD. I've been the vice dean for teaching and training at the University of Pretoria. So I know the higher education landscape, I think, a little bit. My question is for tonight is why we as industrial psychologists, we do a job design before we design the training and development pathway. So where is the scope of practice that was published? And I think that's an important question that we also need to understand. Sharon, thank you, and Lene, thank you for the introduction.
Thank you so much, Carol. So we also have Sylvia Baloy, who serves on the SIOPSA Exco and is in charge of professional practice. So she has been the bridge between the Health Professions Council and our members within SIOPSA, and she'll also give a perspective based on the conversations that have been happening in the last few months, and also just help us think through the implications of these proposed frameworks. Sylvia, you want to jump in and say hello to our colleagues and how you are entering the conversation today?
Thanks, Sharon. Thanks, colleague. It's an important thing that we are at the moment. I think we just need to unmute people, to mute people when they join. Yeah. So thank you. This is an important event that we are having, this evening, and it's also showing the importance of belonging to, to an organization like SIOPSA. because when this thing broke out, you know, everybody was in panic. People didn't know where to go, what to do. But the biggest thing is that our members reached out, because some of the members, you know, saw this before we, you know, it was even brought to our attention. So the biggest thing is that we are one of the main stakeholders within the HPCSA. But unfortunately, in certain instances, you know, even if you are an important stakeholder, some of the information you get them along the way with everybody else. So this is one of those things that we had to, you know, get along the way. But the biggest thing is for the members, is individuals, because there's a lot of panic out there. The biggest thing is there's no need for us to panic. This is not a personal attack on an individual. It's about the profession. It's about the registration. So we're talking here industrial psychologists, we're also talking psychometrists as well. So when messages like this come out, you know, HPCSA understand. That's why they have done these road shows, because they couldn't just change this by their own. So they have to do road shows, get inputs and all of that. But us, we are the ones who have to make contributions in terms of what we want to see out of this whole thing, because they will run the road shows and then at the end they'll say, but you know, you were consulted and then we are going ahead with this. So that's why a coordinated effort like this, we thank the president, you know, for spearheading this and making sure that our voice are heard. And then we'll have one voice. So when people go, even those who are not able to attend, because the 13th, not everyone is going to be able to attend. But if you are here in this meeting, even subsequently, you know, if there's certain ideas that come for you after the meeting, you more than welcome to still feed them into the, you know, into the group, so that we're able to present a view. And then once all of these things are done, and then the HPCSA make a ruling, for example, as the body, we can, you know, we have a right to respond to what they are saying. So it's not like they will do something and then run without us having a view. So that's why we are coordinated as SIOPSA, and then we get inputs, and then we'll be able to go out there. We've been, as SIOPSA, we've been representing SIOPSA within the HPCSA. Over the last few months, they've been talking about the forensic psychology. I mean, forensic psychology has been something outside our domain. But in those meetings, what they were saying is that all the psychologists, it doesn't matter, they didn't even specify which categories, they said all the psychologists. So there was representation from SIOPSA, from research, from education, from clinical. So all the categories, the psychology categories were represented there. And not in any of those meetings where somebody said, yeah, but you know, IOP, you're not going to play a role here, because they understand that everyone has a role to play. But when they bring a proposal like this, if we just leave it, then they will run by it and say, oh, you know, you are just research, you are academic, you know, stay in the corner. But we need to present our views and present them in a logical manner as we engage with them, for them to realize that we're not competing with anyone. We are psychologists in our own rights. In a few, I think 2020, 2021, when the COVID started, we were not doing counseling, but it came forth that, you know, as a psychologist, you can do counseling. So we're already doing all of those things. So what is required now is to have a view in terms of what are they proposing. And then also from our side, we have the right to respond, to say, that's not what we are doing. That's not, there's people who are in academic, there's people who are in research, but there's a lot of our practitioners who are independent. So if this, whatever this means, then it means it challenges what you're doing on the side. It challenges what most of our organizations are doing. It challenges what we are doing in the organizations, because in the organizations, we are recognized as psychologists. But if this thing is coming and then it's not managed correctly, it could lend, people will start saying, oh, you know what, we can't deal with IOP, we can't deal with psychometrics, we want clinical, we want. And so we know our space, so we need to act in our space. And this is a great platform for us to raise those concerns and raise them. And then obviously from SIOPSA, there will be a document after this that will go to the HPCSA to say, as SIOPSA, this is our position. And then we'll be able to take it from there. Thanks, Sharon.
Thank you very much, Sylvia, for framing that for us. So I think to get us on the same page, I'm going to ask Paro and Lene to share their understanding of the proposed framework. And then Sylvia, Ruwain, and other colleagues who are on the call who might have additional inputs, you are welcome to chip in. So let's start with the proposed pathway 1. So if you want to make it a little bit bigger for eyes that are a little bit blind, that would help. And then you can just explain what that means for us.
I just have to figure out.
The plus sign. Yeah, great.
Yeah, it was
Okay.
hidden behind my ruler, my menu bar. Okay, I have it.
Okay,
Okay,
over to you.
Sharon, you, Coral, Ruwain, you must help. I'm going to explain as I understand it, and it is a challenge to understand it. Okay, I'm just going to say straightforward what I only learned in the end, which made a lot of sense for me. So pathway 1, let me first say there's 2 pathways. So they will propose on the 13th of June, as they did in Cape Town, the HPCSA Board of Psychology, the whole board of all the categories, 2 pathways, which they now want to implement to replace, let's say, the pathway that we are now on. So this pathway basically does away with the registered counselor and psychometrist categories. So you will see here at the bottom, we have, let's talk about industrial psychology firstly. We have a 3-year degree here. What is interesting is they say Psych 1, Psych 2, Psych 3. So we have a question, will it include industrial psychology undergrad as well then? Which goes into an honors degree, which you can go 2 ways then. Let's say firstly, you go into a master's degree, the M1, coupled with the internship in the M2 year. You will see it is linked. It is actually part of the degree where the industrial psychologist then registered. They call it the academic pathway. It is not different of what we have now. It is called academic because we are not the B-Psych professional program. At our university, Northwest University, where I teach, we have a 3-year degree, which is a BCom or a BA, industrial psychology. It goes to an honors, it goes to a master's, and obviously a PhD as well. And then the student applies for the internship and then they register. So it's quite similar, this pathway, to what we have now, okay? But after the 3-year degree, you have to do the honors and then move upwards, complete a postgraduate diploma, so that you can complete an internship, and then only do you fall under a generalist psychologist, let's call it category for now. They say that the general psychologist, you go with the psychology pathway as well, and then here the specialization happens. So you have a category here that goes into professional masters 1, focused internship, and then there are the rest of the categories. So one question that we had a lot is, what is the implication for our registrations that we currently have? We don't know. We don't know how. Probably it's going to be for all the students that's starting to train now. This is what's going to happen. If they want to translate us from our categories over to this, we don't know. That is one of the questions that we will definitely ask. Okay, so pathway 1, general counselor and the psychometrist categories fall away.
Okay.
Pathway 2.
So maybe Lene, before maybe we have a discussion on both. So let's explain both, and then we can go back and clarify a few things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Pathway 2. Here they have included HPCSA, which we're not quite sure what it means. We will ask that question as well on the 13th. So pathway 2, what they did here is that combined, yeah, you will see, the psychological counselor with the general psychology. Okay, so start at the bottom again. You have your 3-year degree, similar as in Pathway 1, which goes into an honors, into an academic master's, and then you can register. Or you go from the 3-year up directly to the postgraduate diploma, which was not in the previous pathway. And from here, then you can register as a psychological counselor. So our question is here, where is the internship now? So probably it's included here. But we see in the psychology degree, it is separately. So we're not quite sure how that falls under the industrial psychology category now. You can also still complete your honors and then move up to the postgraduate diploma and then register as a psychological counselor, which then, like I said, is a combination of the registered counselor and the psychometry categories we know now. Move on then to the professional masters, the internship, and then still there is the general psychologist category that everyone will register. Additional training brings us then down to the specialist categories as we know them now. So the industrial psychology falls out here. We don't see it in the top pathway, not in pathway 1 or 2. We very much are clustered here with the research psychologists. So we're not quite sure what that means. If we do the below pathway, can we still consult? Can we still do our counseling, our interventions? We don't know. We don't have that answer. We just, as we understand the pathways, present them to you as we understand them. I'm going to go back to pathway 1 if you want to just add your comments there, Carl.
Okay, so colleagues, it help if you understand in a certain sense where this comes from. So if you think about an educational psychologist, you will understand the professional pathway for the clinical and counseling and neuropsychologists, because you do a free, in matter of fact, you do a B.Ed, which is a 4-year program, 480 credits, and therefore you study 3 years, and 1 year you go back and work at the school for 1 year before you do anything else. So if you look at that 4-year, that is typically what happened with professional qualifications. You get the B.Ed, you get the engineers, you get the LLB, which is the lawyers. So that's where they build this, and then they build the rest around it. So you need to understand the process or the mindset that they follow to design pathway 1. What is interesting, and I think they're trying to really grapple with the issue that we're the only profession in the world where our first registration is on master's level. So the rest of the world already do it after a professional degree, and I think that's where they get the internship. So I'm not sure why there's an internship over and above the workplace learning, which is the 1 year that you act as a school teacher and not necessarily work in the profession. So then there's an internship. And then again, what they do here, and I think it's a mistake, is that they assume you can do your master's in 1 year, and then you do a focused internship as part of your M2, and then you register as a specialist. So I think a little bit of a medical fraternity came in there, that you register as a specialist. What I think they left out, if you look at the top, they say health profession council registration is over here, but they left it out on this side in QF 8, year 8. They don't say anything about becoming a specialist over here. So then if you think about, just want to put that one off. So if you think about the professional, so it's based on a professional first degree, then the academic part, that's our second part that they refer to. They also make an assumption that we all do a BA psychology. But we do BA psychology, we do BCom industrial psychology, we do a BSOC science, which other universities present. So you can't go from a BA to a BCom degree without a bridging program. So there's a little bit of a challenge on that one in terms of the process. I just want to highlight a few things for you. Then again, they highlight the M1, which is 180 degrees, 180 credits. And then included in that is your M2, which is a mental mistake because there's only one university that do their M1 in 1 year, and that's University of Cape Town. University of Johannesburg is also doing it, but they're moving away from that because the workload is just too much for the student to complete that 180 credits in 1 year. So that's basically the mental mind shift that they've used in that one. Lene, you can go to the second one. So if I don't go the professional route and open it up, although I'm confused about the higher education qualification sub-framework. So the higher education qualification sub-framework is the act, the Higher Education Act that was published in 2007. The challenge with the Higher Education Qualification Act that was published in 2007 is they left out the BTech, the MTech, and the DTech. So then they revisited this because the University of Technology complained, and they created the sub-framework, and this is what they refer to, where the BTech becomes sort of the equivalent of a honors, but important, the master's is now called a professional master's, and the doctorate at the Universities of Technology are called a professional doctorate. You also need to understand the setup of universities if you go into this space. That's why I mention it so that you can understand that this is not necessarily correct the way they've done it here. I don't want to focus on what is difficult, but I would like you to understand the process. So what they've done here again is they based the whole psychology program on a B Psych that they are already trying from 2000 to implement. Then, as Lene properly indicated, the rest of the program, I think there's nothing wrong with how they've unpacked that. I think most of clinical and counseling psychology and educational psychology would be able to fit that one. It is really more a challenge for us if we go on to the industrial psychology, because on this pathway where they indicate us. So again, my question about what is the difference between a BA, a BCom, or a degree, if you look at that, so you can't just say be Psych 1, Psych 2, Psych 3. You need to have at least 2/3 of, for example, in a BCom degree and a BA degree, 2/3 of your majors need to be in this field. So you need to have Psych 3A and Psych 3B, for example, if you talk about modules. Then there's for honors. It looks okay for me if I say that because that's the reality at my university currently, is that not all the honors students get elected to go into an academic or a master's degree. So they try to create a bridge here, even from the honors back to the postgraduate diploma, in terms of creating some career for people, which I think is fine. They can do that. My question about the postgraduate diploma is it's a learning pathway. So am I going to get credits for the industrial psychologist if I do the postgraduate diploma because I already have the same qualification? What is the articulation possibilities? What is the articulation possibilities back from the postgraduate diploma back into the master's? So there's a few questions for me. What I miss here is now they've taken out the health professions professional registration here that they had on the previous slide. So where does this is this the counselor or the less registration, the first registration, or is the second registration, and where does it fit into the postgraduate qualifications? They, of course, don't address PhDs in this one, which I'm glad they don't. we can have a different discussion on that one. But I think if I look at the process, it does reflect in some sort the current reality on the ground, with a few significant changes. For example, I can't think that they already decided on this pathways to include the master's internship in this M2 year. There's a lot of work still to be done on that, and we're not going to accept it. And we can talk a little bit about it. I don't want to go into too much detail. Lenay, I think that can shed some different light on in terms of the programs that we see in front of us.
I think also add in the commentary, colleagues, so that we can understand the subtext that they add for each of the pathways.
Okay, do you mean this, Sharon?
Yes, because some people are saying we don't understand what that means, and how is it relevant to the pathway? Yeah. Okay,
so pathway 1, but the subtext says the registered counsellor, and I want to add psychometrist category falls away. Professional B psych cannot accommodate large numbers. This is now the let's say motivation. It's relatively expensive and many universities might not want to offer it. So this will decrease the pool of prospective applicants for professional postgraduate training. Alternative pathways are therefore strongly recommended. And they say the registration as general psychologist upon completion of a 4-year professional 480 credit degree includes work integrated learning. Let me just go up there, show, here it is. So here's the work integrated learning, and then specialization in clinical counseling educational, there they include us, industrial, neuropsychology, takes place after completion of the 360 credit professional master's degree on NQF level 9. And they say the masters in research and industrial psychology remain the only academic masters recognized for professional registration, as is also currently the case. So it's true. So currently, for example, at Northwest University, we have a BA or a BCom industrial psychology degree, which they call an academic degree, but it leads to registration, as opposed to the professional B Psych that leads to registration on a professional pathway. If we look at the second pathway, what they noted here, so in this professional pathway, the following professional designations are psychological counselor and then generalist psychologist. Selections into the B-Psych or PGDIP and professional master's program should be reviewed to meet the national agenda and professional requirements. Pathway 1 cannot accommodate large professional numbers, like they said, it's labor intensive. Universities might not want to offer it, so this may decrease the pool of prospective applicants for professional postgraduate training. Alternative pathways are therefore strongly recommended, like they do here. The psychological counselor is an amalgamation between the psychometrist and the counseling. So it's this one here. It's an amalgamation. So you can go from the, let's say, the industrial psychology pathway up to the PGDIP register. Old psychometrist registration would have been this, but now it's an amalgamation that they are proposing. All students accepted into a master's in psychology who completes an internship and a mini dissertation qualifies then to register as a generalist psychologist. Masters in research and industrial psychology remain the only academic degrees recognized for professional registration. This is what it's now, so it's nothing new. Candidates who wish to specialize then in clinical counseling, educational and neuropsychologists must do additional training. So it's this one, this, then you do your general psychologist, then you specialize and register, And then lastly, for the first internship, it can be an accredited tailor-made program. The second focused internship must be at an accredited training institution. So it's, this internship then is focused. as they say. So yeah, from my side, I just want to say, it's a lot of detail, and it can be very confusing. So as I understand, and there's a lot of detail we need to clarify. Yeah, I'm going to interrupt myself. I just want to say this. They have only invited training institutions of the internships and the universities, the HODs. I asked what the reason was for that. Someone at the HPCSA, and they said, because we develop the programs, the training programs, they have to inform us first, and then they go towards the practitioners later, which I understand, because we have to understand what do we need to do with our degrees now, because we need to change them, you see. So that is understanding why they presented to us first. And then I just want to say it's a lot of detail. We really have to understand the thinking behind this. Because to my understanding, pathway 1 means no psychometrist registration, no counselor registration anymore. It's replaced by a generalist psychologist who can then specialize after masters, after an internship. Basically, we remain the same here, except there is another bridge we can take up to the PG, do an internship, and also be a general psychologist. If you want to be an industrial psychologist, you have to come back to your master's, do the internship, and then register. Coral, did I simplify it too much?
No, Lena, I think you've done a wonderful job. So my question, colleagues, is and that's why I asked in the start of this meeting is so what does the job description for a generalist psychologist look like? What is the job specifications? Was it published? Are we going to look at it before you design a training pathway? We that are working in organizations, you don't go to the CEO and say you have a director of marketing and this is the training pathway that we need, and we instruct the universities to change it. This is not how it works. So what is the job description? It's a total move away from the current scope of practices within all the professions. So if you came to us and explained that a little bit and then come and say, ask us as universities to have an input, then it would have looked differently, my assumption. So I think, Lena, you're right. It falls away. Then in the second postgraduate section, they follow the medical model. So if you become a GP, only after that you can specialize as an internist or whatever. So I think because they're not so educational or industrial psychologists and don't have proper representation there, this is why they came up with this as a start off. So I think if you just go back to the descriptions that you've put up in pathway 1, I just want to say, so that the colleagues understand this as well. Since they started with this professional B-Psych degree, I think there's 1 or 2 universities that implemented it, because you need to understand that the funding framework in South Africa is about outputs. So the university only get output when you complete your first degree, and then in terms of the funding for that degree. So if you fall off a program and go to another university, my university don't get any money for that. And then secondly, if you complete your honors, there's an output in universities. And universities said that psychology 1 and 2 is really one of the, we call it in academia, the milk cow, because universities make a lot of money, a lot of students attend those programs. So if you change it to a B-Psych professional program, universities say, now I need to wait 4 years, my throughput rate is lower, students already they need to register in their first year as a student in psychology, then they need to register 4 years, so there's a financial implication to the students. A lot of students are not in favor of that. You also need to know that I have a discussion with the educationist here, not with the receiving end. So the cost implication of a 4-year professional degree looks different. The implications of having then a work program is that you do a learnership in our terms, that becomes a learnership. We will have to go to companies and get funding for, or ask the organizations to fund that. So did the Health Professions Council have discussions with the CETAs so that the CETAs in the different sectors can assist us to make sure that our students are placed for 1 year like the teachers? No, it doesn't. So now you go into a forced to work for 1 year, and then you come back and do your honors degree. And then you do an internship. At which company are you going to do that internship? So that's why they say it seems that it's not going to be accepted, might not want to offer this because the cost implications for the universities are just going to be too high. Maybe that one, maybe the second one in terms of the comments, and then we can give back to Sharon, I think, Lenay. So the second one, they also have the same. So if I present this proposal and they say, this decreases the pool of prospective students, alternative pathways are therefore strongly recommended. So why don't you present it to us? Give us insight in terms of your thought. You didn't do it here, but you recommend it for yourself. So why are you consulting with us? And I think they confuse the process where you register as a generalist psychologist and then on master's level again, and then go into specialization, which is a medical model into the other categories, although they try sort of to accommodate us in the interim. But you need to know if they change the top, then it's very easy to force the others to go exactly the same process. And if they get that accepted, we really have a challenge. They also don't indicate, as Lenay correctly highlighted this. So are we talking, because my Senate, I need to take a program 4 years before a new program starts. My university's Senate are very complicated because there's a lot of thinking that goes into that. Parliament to sign the law so that the higher education, Department of Higher Education can make the payments, etc., etc. So it's a highly complicated, audited process. So where do we start? When is this going to be implemented? What is the processes? Are they then going to publish the scope of practice that was strongly resisted in my time by my president, Andrew Johnson, and then me taking over in 2012, 2013. So where's the job description of these newly created professions that they created? Lenay?
Okay, Flora, I'm going to stop there. Sharon, back to you.
Thanks so much, colleagues. Sylvia, do you want to jump in from professional practice side? Because I think we also need to kind of get a lens of the conversations that you've been having with the Health Professions Council. What are the implications of this pathway, and what do we need to be thinking about going forward? Because the academic conversation, I think, is quite clear. We have a space at the table to actually question and interrogate these proposed frameworks. Sylvia, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so I think from the professional practice, the discussions that we have been having in the past, they haven't separated industrial psychology from the other practices. So I think it's a concern now. Why are you separating it, from the other ones? Because if you start separating it, then, it starts giving some implication that maybe it's not that important as the other, categories as well. So we need to understand why is it not part of those four. I think in one of the documents that they indicated, they also mentioned industrial psychology, but it's not in the top pathway. So the big question is, what if you start separating and say, oh, this goes into this category, this goes into another category, then it starts creating ideas that, okay, maybe that one is not as important as the other one. Here they're mentioning it, specialization in clinical counseling educational. So it's important for it to be shown. If it's there, part of that specialization, why is it not showing there at the top? So we need to have it there. And then some of the discussions that they were talking about, I mean, when you're talking forensic, you're talking counseling and all of that. all of these categories, they are going to be part of that. But now if you start putting industrial psychology on the side, then it means we may not be able to do some of the things that we were supposed to be doing. And the other thing is that if we look at the medical module, whatever module you use, you can't say, okay, you know, the dentist, they must form part of this and the other one. If you start separating, then you start creating the perception also in the mind of the people who are dealing with us. We are in the workplace. And when I'm in the workplace and then I come in as an industrial psychologist, my clients don't question me. But the minute this thing starts coming up, they say, no, there's a professional, there's clinical, counseling, educational, neuropsych. I mean, neuropsych is probably one of the newest, but it's there on there. And then us as IOP, we've been the longest, we're not in that. So I think the question is to understand why then are you trying to, you know, is the divide and rule kind of from where you're looking at from a practitioner's perspective. So I think we need to ask those questions so that we understand clearly why, you know, what is happening. And then is it still going to be governed? I mean, one of the questions was asked, is it still governed by the HPCSA? If not, then what does that mean, you know, for the practitioners? Yeah, so I will leave it there. Thank you.
Awesome, Sylvia. Thank you so much. I think that gives us some insights. Andrew, your hand is up. You want to jump in?
Thanks, Sharon. I just had the question right at the beginning is why is there distinction between this pathway for research and IOP vis-a-vis the other degrees? And because for me, exactly to what Sylvia has just said, I personally don't like that distinction because unless we can get some clear explanation, why do they make such a distinction? And then for me, what would be important is what is the society's view on that as to should we not be included as one pathway for all psychologists, irrespective of which area you specialize in. And that's notwithstanding all the practical issues that have to be resolved, like curricula and approvals and all of that at universities. I'm simply making the point that we are trying to speak about psychology as one profession in which you specialize in different areas with regard to whether it's in the workplace, whether it is clinical, whether it is counseling and so forth. And I think this idea of this split, the CIOPSA itself need to take a view on it and say, do we support such a distinction being made or don't we support it, because that will give an indication where we ourselves stand with regard to such a matter. I personally don't like that distinction.
Thank you, Andrew. And in the roadshows, that's one of the questions they're asking practitioners, like choose a pathway. But from our consultative discussion with colleagues in trying to understand the pathways, we need to understand what is the motivation for this, what is the intended outcome, what are the implications before we make an arbitrary, we want pathway 1 or pathway 2. So our position at the moment is around getting clarity, going into the conversation with an open mind and really taking forward all the concerns and questions that IOP colleagues have around these pathways. Zahira, your hand is up.
Hi, colleagues. Sorry, I'm in the dark, so I won't be even visible. And I think without repeating what colleagues have said, my question is, who determines how professionals are trained? Is it HPCSA or is it the professional bodies that inform the HPCSA? Because then therefore, who are they able to make a decision on our behalf? Number 2, why would they, I mean, I still don't understand. I'm not an academic and I don't understand the idea behind the internship at a 4th year level. I just think it's going to be too much. But if we are all psychologists, why would they actually want to take industrial psychologists out of that 4th year internship? I'm not agreeing with it, but I'm just saying, if it's for all psychologists, it should be up until we all specialize. Number 3, the way they are putting it to say some are professional and some are academic. I know one of the ladies explained what it means. We don't all go and do BCom. Some of us, we do bachelor degree, and we do psychology until 3rd year. And so by virtue of what we do, we are actually professionals who are bound by ethics, and our clients are not clinical clients, but are organizations. So we need to be regarded like other specializations as a professional career, not an academic career. And like I said, I don't understand what the academic means in this regard. So like Sylvia was saying, if I were to give my input, I think it's a concern that we are seen not as professional, that with a specific specialization, and I don't think that needs to be encouraged at all. That's my input. Oh, sorry. The other thing that the HPCSA should always bear in mind is that industrial organizational psychology is not just a South African career, it's a global career. So however that they're doing it, they need to bear that in mind in terms of how they affect us and how we will be able to be viewed even globally. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you so much, Zahira. And that was one of the comments that came in our conversation to say, if we are going to be recognized globally, what are the implications for our profession? Because we're not restricted to working in South Africa. I think for many colleagues on the call, you work beyond the borders of South Africa. So what does that mean? What does that mean for colleagues who are in the pipeline to register as industrial psychologists? Tandy, Dr. Gama, you want to jump in?
Yes, hello, colleagues. First and foremost, let me just say, disclaimer, I am so, dear Makar, I am so confused about this whole thing. I'm scared. But with a bit of explanation, I think from the two colleagues, the biggest question I have is, yes, I'm also one of those that I don't understand, and I don't like the idea of us being put separately, because to me, that's probably the very beginning of us not knowing, basically not being placed anywhere, and people will not know where we belong. That to me sounds like this is just the beginning of us being told that we actually don't know how to classify you. We don't know where to place you. And to me, that just spells disaster. So I don't like it myself as well. We are part of the psychological fraternity of psychologists, and we should be classified with other psychologists as such. Point number one. Point number two, I think as organizational industrial psychologists, and I think this has been raised by one of the colleagues here to say, we are, yes, psychologists, but we are psychologists within industry, within organization. And I think one of the biggest things we need to highlight is that for us to be called industrial psychologists, probably we should be called by what we are now, industrial and organizational psychologists. Officially so that there isn't any sort of loss, the organizational part is lost in transit, and as a result, we end up necessarily not being recognized as organizational experts. That brings me to my third question, which is, if you look at the path one, as colleagues have explained, where I get a bit lost is after that generalist or the so-called generalist psychologists, which you can do, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, colleagues, with your postgraduate diploma or your honors degree before you take the specialization route. My question then to me is, at that stage, are you regarded as yes, you are generalist psychologist, in a sense of the psychometrics, the counseling part of it, because I see it's also written counseling there, but is it counseling after your master's, or is it counseling with just the diploma here that is placed here? And thirdly, I think on that layer as well, the truth is that out there in industry, we do work closely within the HR fields. And I think some of us as professionals that have worked within organizations have worked very well within the space of HR. Where does this put us now? Once we are looked at in terms of pathways, academic and research, when you have those qualifications, and how does that talk to this generalist position that has come forth now? And I know my questions are folded and layered, but that's basically what runs out in my mind right now.
Thank you, Tandy. Colleagues, you want to jump in? Ruane, Lene, Carol?
So maybe can I jump off, because we must clarify the professional academic. So this is two pathways, and it's academic speaking. So if you talk professional, your first degree is a professional degree, a B.Ed, a LLB, a B.Psych. So that's the professional route. What I think they made a mistake here, and you, as I said, you need to think the first one is based on the educational psychologist, teacher, and then you become something else. So the academic route, actually they wrong here, because they tell themselves. So if you are University B and you don't register a B.Psych, you have to present an academic program, which is a 3-year BA psychology, and then do a honors in BA psychology. Only then you can go back to the professional route. This is now my insight, and thank you for asking that question, Andrew. Then only you can go into the route to become a general psychologist. So it's actually the second part, the academic part, is not only for research and industrial psychology, because if they force us into this, 90% of universities will do the second route, where they go up and then go into the professional, because they're not going to present a B.Psych degree, because they're already trying to implement that from 2000. Lene?
Carol, before Lene jumps in, so are we saying then with pathway 2, it gives people the option to either go the academic or the professional route? So I'm not, if you can just clarify which pathway you're speaking about here.
So I say for the health professions, from the Health Professions Council that look down at the universities, we'll see University A doing a professional B.Psych degree, because they're the only university that agreed to do that. I think the College of Psychology is currently doing that. Then the other one, because we in our current speak, Sharon, we talk about a B.Psych equivalence. And I think there's only 2 universities that do that, of which Stellenbosch University is one. So if you go to the academic route, you have a 3-year psychology degree. And then I'm concerned, because what are we going to present as industrial psychologists? Because our training curricula differ from BA psychology to BCom industrial psychology. We do a little bit of a different focus, although at the end, you go into a honors degree, and only then you articulate, which is the equalizer, is the PG dip, to make sure the outcomes is the same. And then after that, you register as a generalist psychologist. So I think there's a pathway. So it is 2 pathways. The one is starts with a professional degree. The second one is where University B, C, and D don't present a professional degree because they are very strong on their income. And they say we do have a BA psychology or a BCom industrial psychology or a BA industrial psychology 3-year degree, and then a honors degree. And only then you go to a postgraduate diploma. So then the postgraduate diploma, my view, should become a national qualification like we have in the CETAs, where the postgraduate diploma curriculum is centrally designed and approved by the Health Professions Council, Lene, and that creates its own difficulties for universities if you have predetermined. And I saw Nanette do also, where's the selection going to take place? So, but what is important, Andrew, is that the distinction between professional academic is about your first degree, how you get your first degree. That is academic speak. So a first degree, professional 4-year B.Psych, or a 3-year plus a honors. That's an academic. So we need to feed.
I hear that, Carol. Can I respond, Sharon?
Okay, so you can respond, but Lene is on hold, and then Louise, you come after Lene, and then Gulshan and Ruwen.
Okay.
I just wanted to say to Caro, in the UK where I did my master's in occupational psychology, it's accepted by the British Psychological Society as part of the graduate program that all students do a general degree in psychology up to honors level, what they call honors. It's not a separate year, but you pass with honors and so on. And then only do they specialize into a particular field, as we have just indicated. I don't know all the fields that they have registered, but I presume they're similar to ours. I think the point would be, as part of conversation, it's probably more internal because it will also clarify our own particular position. Why is it that industrial psychology have to be taken from first year for a particular student to register within industrial psychology? I cannot speak for other countries, but I know in the UK that is the case, because they do a general degree for everybody, and then students specialize afterwards, as I think is proposed in the pathway 1.
Yeah.
And as to whether we choose 1 or 2, I mean, that's a debate that needs to be had. I think I'm just proposing that there should be one pathway. There shouldn't be these different pathways. But the point I wanted to make was that why is it, the question for me was, why is it that in South Africa there's an insistence that you must do industrial psychology from first year onwards, instead of what is accepted, for example, in the UK environment? I don't know what's the case for the US, obviously, where people just do a general degree.
Yeah. So Sharon, a very quick response. That's a huge problem, and the only country in the world that do this, BCom HR, BCom auditing, BCom, is the country called South Africa. So I'm just back. I taught on postgraduate level in India. India and the US, you do a first generic degree, and only after that you specialize. For example, you go to law school and then you specialize. So I can tell you, Andrew, we're not going to change that landscape. It's been tried already in 2000, and that's why the higher education qualification framework was promulgated by which took over. And there's also a challenge for us, because the only profession in South Africa currently that are not constitutional, and I'm on record for this, is the Health Professions Council, because they don't align with the higher education qualification framework was promulgated in 2008. Because the higher education, the Health Professions Act is, you won't believe it, 1974, 1976, long before. So there is a problem, but it's a higher education problem. I've participated in significant workshops where we try to, for example, generalize a BCom degree and only then specialize after that. But it's so embedded in our system that we're not going to change it. It is the ideal. I can tell you that the students that come from Australia and from Britain and from the US that do a first degree and specialize in psychology or specialize in law or specialize in medical sciences, go to medical school after their first degree, it makes a huge difference. But you're not going to change the higher education landscape in South Africa.
Thanks, Carol. Lene, are you ready to jump in?
Yes. I just want to think where I want to jump in. So Shaida said she's not an academic. This is confusing to her. I am an academic, and it's extremely confusing to me as well. So we are really trying to make sense. And as Tandiwe said, who informs the universities what our qualifications should look like? Not the HPCSA. They inform us what our professional the professional part of our qualification should look like, namely our training in the internships. So we can understand that they are starting to make voices in terms of we want the internship to be embedded in the qualification and so on, because they are supposed just to give their input regarding the professional training in the internship. They are not supposed to inform us what our degrees should look like. They can tell us what the competencies are and the outputs. But just like Carol just said, the higher education framework informs us. The higher education institution should tell us, this is what the basics of the qualification should be like. This is the credits, etc., etc. So we find it very strange, Tandiwe, you have said that they tell us what our degrees should look like. And we are asking the question, are the people that should be telling us what it looks like, do they know? Are they informed? And we have reached out to the higher education institution and we informed them about this, and they are busy with their process with the HPCSA. So yeah, that's confusing to us. So I just want to close my comment by adding my voice to Andrew's, and that is what would make sense for me is if they take out completely this lower level, slot us in at the top level. I understand that it's a professional degree and there's an academic degree, but why don't you just, put them in there? What they're saying now is we need a 3-year degree, then we need an honors, which is 4 years, then we need a PG, which is 5 years. And then we need an internship. And then we can be a generalist. Then you need to come back to do your master's to be an industrial psychologist. So there's 1 extra year the whole time for us as industrial psychologists, which I don't understand. So just back out the bottom, put us in there, add us here as an industrial psychologist specialist. And then I completely understand the generalist category. I have understanding for that. I can even go with that. The way in which they want to add us in the pre-grad training, adding our honors and then a PG, that overburdens us. My problem is how are we going to fund our students' studies? The NSFAS only goes up to a certain point. Now you want to add the PG in the internship, another internship. So the whole thing is just complicating things overall. But then again, I just want to say that this will be the questions that we will be asking the 13th of June. Our colleagues in Cape Town did not, because you have to vote for pathway 1 or 2, and they opted to not vote for either. They asked if we can propose a 3rd pathway, and apparently it was said that we can open up for discussion. So most probably we are going to go the same route. Thanks, Sharon.
Thanks, Lene. I don't see Louise's hand up. Gulshan, do you want to jump in?
Can I actually quickly, sorry, can I quickly ask my question?
Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to know, just completely, it might sound a little left wing, but if you now come from a different category of psychology, that would be, sorry, that's my baby in the background, he's talking with us, counseling and clinical, and you wanted to go into IOP, what would be the impact there just by looking at this? How would they be able to transition into our field? Just a question.
That answer is easy, Louise. Give me the scope of practice and then I will be able to make a decision, because then I can identify the gaps and I can recommend a program, but it doesn't exist in this pathway, so you can't do it. Where's the scope of practice?
Thanks, Carol. Gosha?
Yes, hi everyone. Thank you so much. I have more questions than I have any suggestions. And I'm sorry if these questions have been fielded at the outset. I started a bit late on this meeting. My first question is, do we or does anyone know what the rationale behind these career pathways are? And I think the question is, where is it coming from? Perhaps the Health Professions Council, but who, how, where? The second question is, what implications does this have for us who are already in practice, and some of us who might actually be on the tail end of our practices, but we still want to continue? Does this mean we need to relook at qualifications or certifications? What implications does it have for us? And I think Lene has answered my third question, where do we actually have a vision of how we would like industrial organizational psychology to pan out going forward? And even though we may not be able to change the current education, higher education landscape, can we at least influence it in some way to have it aligned to the global practices? Because that is very much the future. And I think we must have some alignment there. My 5 cents worth. Thank you.
Your many cents worth. Thank you, Goshen, and just also for reinforcing a lot of the questions that are being raised in the chat. And I'll ask colleagues to just run through the chat. Rowan, your hand was up, and then Zahira.
Thanks, Sharon. I think the point I wanted to make is that, this is, if we look at this from I suppose from an IOP perspective and from a change science perspective, right, we would say, well, this is the way not to do it, right? And so I think the communication around this has not given us enough clarity. And as a result, there's a lot more questions and assumptions that we are making. So none of us actually have the answers because this is not clear. And part of what the workshop, the roadshow is about is for us to clarify some of the issues that was raised today. And so that's just to put that out there. I mean, if you read this, it just doesn't give enough clarity around some of the questions. And I think a lot of the questions that have come out of here today we'll take into the meeting. I think it's important that, if I just think of the implications, we'll ask the question around scope of practice. We'll ask the questions. What I'm particularly also concerned about is the training of psychometrists and the extensiveness of that. If you're training a generalist, how extensive will that training be? And so there's lots of questions that we'd have to ask around that. And I think as the point around, I think Louise raised that as well. There's a pathway that you can go from IOP into a generalist kind of psychologist perspective. I think that's a positive. And perhaps the question is there a way in which it can come the other way as well? And I think that's part of what we can suggest as part of our engagement with the health professions question. I think that's a good, in the first example, you can do it at an honors level. In the second example, you can actually transition to the above professional qualification after 3 years. And I think that we could, I think I like that idea. And perhaps as we think further about this is about how do we create that kind of, transition between the different psychology types. And I think that's something that we need to perhaps reinforce. I think what this provides us with is, I think Sharon and everyone, is an opportunity to really craft, and I think what the last person was saying is our vision of what we believe, the development of a psychologist should look like. And it should have a strong academic path, but it should also have a strong professional path. And I think we need to consider both of that as we think about it, including the way. What I like about the first one is this workplace learning, or I think WPL. I think it was workplace learning. It's built into the degree, and I think that's a great part. And I wish we could incorporate that as part of the industrial psychology as well. And I think we need to consider. I know the universities have a strong view around the internships, but I think SIOPSA needs to also take a view about how do we see internship integrating into the qualifications and what is our perspectives around that as well. And those are all of the things I think we'll clarify, and then from that we'll put our point of view as a collective out there.
Thanks very much, Rowan. I think it's adding to the pot. Someone asked, what is keeping you awake? Paraphrasing, but as people on this call, what is keeping us awake in terms of our profession? Zahira, over to you.
Yeah, I wanted to link to what Andrew asked, but Gulshin also has that point, talking about the vision of how we see industrial psychology profession. And I just think that this should also provide an opportunity between SIOPSA, the industry, and the academic to talk about that. But what I wanted to say was that some of us who are a little bit older, we were forced to do general psychology up to third year. And we only did industrial psychology as a module at third year. And so we studied with everyone who wanted to end up being industrial psychologists. I don't know at what point that changed. And I must say, because I'm mentoring a lot of students or young professionals, and I find that the lack of foundation of general psychology from some universities is a problem. So I think it's one thing that we need to look at, to say, for us to really be considered as psychologists, we also need to go have that strong foundation of general psychology up to a certain level. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zahira. And colleagues, I'm also going to just, look at the chat. So one of the questions coming up is around, where are these workplace learning opportunities going to come from? If already the current setup is that there aren't enough internships, so where are those placements going to come from? So I think that's also an idea that we need to really think about and percolate and give solutions, because as much as we're confused, part of the expectation from the Health Professions Council is what can we do? Come to the table, help us think. So in your thinking, how could we approach this? So colleagues, you're welcome to jump in on that. Another question is around dual registration. So psychometrists, what is going to happen to them? Another colleague was also asking about, their quest to try and get dual registration over the years. Is this now an opportunity to do that? Maybe let's start with those questions. Anyone in the panel who wants to jump in?
Hi, Sharon. Yes, yeah. So I think the main thing for us, I think we just need to re-emphasize this whole thing that there's no need to separate one category from the others. So any discussions that we have, I like what Prof. Line was saying, that they can put us here on the top and then have all those career paths for all the psychologists. So it doesn't have to be separate. So we just need to emphasize that area there. And then obviously the pathways, we are concerned also with the psychometrists, because part of we're representing psychometrists, and what Ruin was also saying, how rigorous will be their training, because at the moment we're able to monitor that, we're able to ensure that things are done appropriately, but now if it's lined up with the others, how rigorous will that process be? And then we also acknowledge that we are struggling with the internship as it is for now. So now if you're adding additional things, then it becomes more difficult for the people to be registered in the category. So I think mostly it's just to say, why are you separating? Because the research and industrial, you can't group them together. If this whole thing is for psychologists, let everything be for psychologists, have different paths for psychologists, and then you will choose the path that you want to take as a person, not that it's legislated that you have to follow this path and not the other path. So I think we like the idea of this professional and academic. Yes, we want that, but let's not separate and say this category will follow this path and then the other categories will follow different paths. So that's why I think we need to emphasize in those discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. I think another question that needs to go to the HPCSA is around colleagues who are in independent practice. So a concern being raised here is, my main concern is that this may jeopardize independent practice registration, which is critical in providing psycholegal work where independent opinion is key. So we need to just clarify that as well in terms of the training and, how people will operate. And a comment here from Christine. Is Zahira, is that a legacy hand or it's a new comment? Okay. So Christine's comment here. Christine, are you still on? Oh, it's a legacy hand. Okay.
Yes.
Christine, do you want to jump in, Christine Duplessis, and just share your thoughts around the psychological support? So your read of the pathways. You want to just share
Hi,
with your
everyone.
colleagues?
Yes, I'm definitely not as qualified as everyone else to speak about the topic. What I just feel is there's always been this whole issue about there's not enough psychologists for the South African citizens. So what I think they're aiming to achieve is really making it more accessible. So bringing basic services to the citizens earlier, and then keeping us on the same path because we don't provide those basic services. So that's kind of my take on it. Slightly different stance than everyone else, but I do think it's just providing those services slightly earlier, bringing it forward with a basic qualification, being available to provide services. How good those services will be is going to be questionable. What can you really offer after 3 years and an internship? So that's questionable, but I think that's why they're separating us out, because we don't necessarily provide those services on a daily or ongoing basis, more within a business context. It's just my 2 cents.
Sharon, so
Your
if I
many
can,
cents, Christine.
Sharon, if I
Sharon?
can respond to that one. So there's an easy way out. That's exactly why we've designed the postgraduate diploma as part of higher education qualification framework, because a postgraduate diploma is a teaching only. You only do teaching on that one and you only learn. There's no research on it. So you don't need to do a mini dissertation or any. So if you design a new profession, you articulate what that professional qualification, professional person in terms of a job specification is. You can design a postgraduate diploma exactly, and you have all the articulations in the world from all the universities that can go into that, and you present it, and that presentation after that qualification, you do a work program learning of some sorts, and you register as a community psychologist, for example. But we start with a proper job analysis. We can then do a postgraduate diploma that flows into that. So that's not the problem.
Thanks, thanks, Carol. And I think those practical implications need to actually be ironed out and paint the different scenarios so people can understand what it means. Melissa, your hand is up.
Thank you, Sharon. Yes, I've been now for many years been involved, with the training of the psychometrists specifically, and it actually saddens me in a bit that category will fall away, because some of our students will really become a psychometrist and they will be forever a psychometrist, have a little independent practice, and make a career of that and a living of that. So I understand now that will be replaced by the generalist psychologist. So I was just thinking about, giving availability of these people to communities and but restricting them, taking out that category. Is it really going to be worth the while for a person that, have a psychometrist registration and can still be successful and have a little independent practice, or even work in a company as a psychometrist, because we need those people and they might not want to be a psychologist per se. So I'm just thinking about that. I remember many years ago they took out the, I can't remember, the psychology assistant position category. And that was a huge blow. I was working in the mines at that stage, and we were using those assistants to assist, with administration of tests, etc. So then we had to now have a psychometrist employed. So now what's happening is we're taking out the psychometrist. Now it must be a psychologist. So I was just thinking about that, taking away opportunities for people that might not want to go the full psychologist role, but still have a big role to play on the level of a psychometrist. And yeah, that's just my concern with this.
Thank you, Melissa. And I think this is why platforms like these are important, because some of you have been on this path in different ways. You've accessed the profession in different ways. And I think we actually have a whole lot of power than we give ourselves credit to. So let's not shy away from sharing ideas, from continuing with the questions as stuff continues to percolate after this discussion, because we will go as, a collective to put forward these concerns to the Health Professions Council. And, this cannot go ahead without agreement from the stakeholders, because the academic, departments, for example, are the ones who need to push through the curriculum. So all is not lost. I know it's very concerning. It is our livelihood, but we mustn't panic. Let's use our voices. Let's use our collective memory and influence to actually hold the council to account. Louise, your hand is up. And while Louise is sharing, colleagues, if you can just think about your last comments. I see we have 4 minutes before the call ends, just in terms of closing out the conversation. Louise?
I won't be long, Sharon. I'm just reminded of something. So one of the reasons we get approached is because of the internship management program, in terms of, being included in these conversations. And when I had a look at the invitation, it actually highlighted all internship sites. And time and again, when we attend these conversations, I've noticed like all the hospitals come, right, for the clinicals. I'm not sure who represents counseling psychology, and I've almost never seen any schools come forward for educational psychology, because I know they're the internship sites. I think what we could do more of, if I could just place that on the call, is have our internship sites, because there seems to be this idea that there's, there aren't enough IOP internships, yes, but there are a hell of a lot of IOP internship sites that get approved in the tailored program pathway. I think they must also possibly in the future attend these types of conversations, because the invite extends to them, but for some reason the actual email is not sent. So maybe that's just something I wanted to mention. When you get conversations like these and it's directed to internship sites, to include all IOP internship sites in that way, not from our side, but from the HPCSA side, we must maybe note that with them.
Louise, can we not
Thank
extend
you
the
so much.
invitation? Sorry, Sharon, to interrupt. Could we not extend that invitation, Louise, to like these particularly the big tailored internship program? So if we could pass that letter on to them and try and get them into the conversation, because we want to get their inputs as well. So we could certainly do that. We still have time.
Yeah, we definitely can. So, Carol, I note you, and you will close as we do that. I just want to let Bronwyn bring in their point before we close.
All right, so this isn't Bronwyn, but it's her husband, Kevin. So my apologies. We're sitting listening as a collective this evening as two practitioners. Maybe just to all present, thank you, first of all, for creating a space of containment. This is something that I think put a lot of people on high alert very quickly, and I'm definitely one of them. So first of all, thank you for that. Thank you, second of all, for the collective voice that we can start to bring to, which is maybe an unconscious issue that is lying here, that has maybe been sitting for a long time, is that in many senses, the identity of the industrial psychologist is often questioned as, oh, you're a psychologist as well. And where we have the platform now to start showing the stakeholders that we play a very critical role in what we do. When I go into an organization, there is an implicit trust that the word is you are a psychologist and you're going to deal with intimate things that occur inside of this organization, some of which are highly unpleasant, and which we have an implicit trust with you as that professional to deal with. So perhaps from the difficulty that we sit with before us now, we can start to create a very solid platform of people understanding the meaningful work that we do, and the very diverse, meaningful work that we do, because we do a lot of very different things every single day. And so my hope is that will be created, and that we will continue to forge genuine relationships, not only with one another, but across the invisible divide, if we can call it that at the moment, between the different categories, that we are not seen as the lesser than, but as the equal going forward. So thank you to everyone, and I hope that the hope can come to fruition as we go forward.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, for that comment. And this is why we have this voluntary body where we can self-organize and start to create spaces where our identity is solid and can be recognized. So thank you for reminding us of that. So Carol, you go first, your quick, short and sharp goodbye, and then we go to Lene, Sylvia, and Rowan.
So one thing that we didn't answer, Sharon, is the international accreditation and recognition. So this is a photo that's been taken at Rotterdam European Work and Organizational Conference in 2012, if I remember correct, 2012. So the Union of Industrial Psychology were created, and these are the representatives of their PSYOP, ASYOP, Canadian PSYOP, etc., because Americans take PSYOP and the others are abbreviations around it. So PSYOPSA is South Africa. So there I stand as president of PSYOPSA. We became the fourth signatory of this union that specifically look at the interest of industrial psychologists across the world. So if you go look at the AGM report in my time, we became the fourth signature of this union in 2012. Because of COVID and anything else, it's not that functional anymore. But I want to confirm to the colleagues, you must know this is one of the initiatives we took as PSYOPSA, because we also signed memorandums of understanding with the British and all the others, PSYOP, to make sure that we are locally also competent. I just want to bring that also to the table, Sharon, and then I will stop sharing.
Thank you, Carol. It is important. We do operate globally, and I know a lot of our colleagues work beyond the border, so there is relevance for us in the profession. Lene, your quick answer, and colleagues, I know we said 6:30, please, in 2-minute indulgence.
Sharon, yes, I just want to say I noted the comments in the chat. I did make a copy for myself, and I will take this to the roadshow on the 13th, and I make it my responsibility to clarify this, especially in terms of what about the current practitioners' registrations, where are we placing them, what is the implication? But thank you so much for the Sharon, and we will do our best, I promise.
Awesome, thank you so much. One PSYOPSA. Sylvia, your checkout.
Yes, yeah. So for colleagues, I think this meeting was really helpful to clarify a lot of things. And, it's not time for us to panic, but it's really a brilliant opportunity that has presented us, before us. So we have a collective voice, so we can actually have the best way we can do and deal with this once and for all, because you don't want every time, from time to time, there's this IOP debate that is coming. So we can have an opportunity now to present, and also is to educate, because sometimes you assuming that everybody understands what our role is. So it's for us to educate and then cement, so that it doesn't have to be from time to time this issue keeps on coming. And we appreciate everyone. And as the president was saying, let's keep the comments coming, so that we can have the document that we can present to HPSA at the end to say, this is our position as PSYOPSA and how we are representing. And it's not only for individuals, but it's a collective voice. Thank you for this session. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. Rowan, over to you.
I think in a similar line, this was really great to have this conversation. And I think we really at a crossroads in terms of IOP, and I think this provides an opportunity to shape the future IOP. And I think this becomes a platform for us to have this conversation. I think perhaps Sharon and Lene, thanks for creating this space, but perhaps what we could do is that I will be at the meeting as well, supporting the others, and we'll be presenting these perspectives at that meeting. But perhaps we could also look at a feedback session where we could just give feedback around what came out of those conversations, and perhaps just schedule something in the future to continue this conversation with this community.
Awesome. Bonisiwe echoes that. Like, yes, we would appreciate another call post the roadshow. So we do make a commitment from our side as PSYOPSA to convene to bring our best thinking around this. Thank you so much, colleagues, for heeding the call, all the chats and messages to help us make sense of this disorientation. So really good evening to everybody. And yeah, let's keep IOP on the map. Our profession matters and we want it to remain relevant. Have a good evening, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Sharon, well done.
Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. This was great. Yeah, I feel held, you know, as an IOP, like we're not alone.